Hello everybody! Welcome to Halfspin, where we talk about the sport of knife throwing. I am a big fan of Kizlyar throwing knives, so today I want to compare all 6 models of Kizlyar throwing knives. When I first got into Kizlyar throwing knives, I could not find any information on them. Each model is designed for a different purpose, but I didn't know that and I couldn't find what purpose they were for. So I want to help you guys out by going through the pros and cons of each model, what they're used for, what they're good for. I think some are better than others, and there's probably some that you shouldn't get depending on what your purpose is. I want to start by saying all Kizlyar throwing knives, just like all professional throwing knives, come unsharpened. They have a dull, false edge. If you want to know why you shouldn't throw sharpened knives, check out my video on sharp throwing knives. Or if you must have a sharpened throwing knife, check out my video on what to do if you want a sharpened throwing knife. But Kizlyar knives come unsharpened. Alright, let's go through each model of Kizlyar throwing knife from biggest to smallest. Sometimes bigger is better. In the world of knife throwing, a larger knife is easier to throw. A larger knife will give you better rotations, and because of that, larger knives are great for full spin throwing. The first knife is the Lepi Stock. The Lepi Stock is an 11.5-inch knife and it weighs 11 ounces. With throwing knives, the closer you are to 1 inch per ounce, the better rotations you are going to get. And so this knife is perfectly weighted for how long it is. Because of the length and weight of this knife, it is great at further distances. It is a good full spin knife. It is not that great of a half spin knife. For me, half spin is around 7 feet, but for me, full spin is about 9 to 10 feet, and this knife really shines at about 9 to 10 feet or further back. So if you're looking for a full spin knife, this is the knife for you. This knife is so easy to throw full spin that a lot of times when I'm throwing with somebody who's never thrown knives before, the Lepi Stock is the knife that I grab. I give them this, I set them around 9 or 10 feet away from the target, and by like the 3rd or 4th throw, they're sticking. So if you plan on doing full spin throwing, you like to throw from the handle, this is the knife. I love this knife for full spin throwing. But if you want to do half spin throwing, there are better Kizlyar knives for that. Next up, we have the Impulse. The Impulse is a 10.5-inch knife weighing in at 12.5 ounces. This is Kizlyar's heaviest knife. Because it is so heavy, it hits with a hard thud. It is fun to throw just because how heavy it is and how hard it hits that target. It has a drop point blade and it is very dull. Even the point is really dull. Because of this, I find this to be a hard knife to stick. If you're good at knife throwing, you can throw any knife, any style. But I would say that this is not a knife for half spin. When you throw this half spin, you have to throw it with great force in order to get it to stick. This knife shines as a full spin thrower, just like the Lepi Stock. But the Lepi Stock is a much easier knife to throw. It's an easier knife to stick. This one, the only reason it sticks is because of its weight and its force when it hits, because again, this is a very dull knife. And so you have to be at a good distance and you have to throw it with force in order for it to stick. I would not recommend getting the Impulse unless you want to have some fun with a really heavy, hard-hitting knife. I have to admit, on occasion, I do enjoy throwing the Impulse. Again, just because of how powerful it is and how hard it hits that target. But it is not a knife that I throw that often. If you're looking to get your first Kizlyar throwing knife, this would not be it. Get one of their more useful throwing knives. But if you already have a lot of throwing knives and you want a really hard-hitting, fun, heavy throwing knife, this is a good one to play with. But not for half spin. This is a good full spin, far distance, heavy hitting throwing knife. Again, this is the Impulse. Next up is the Leader. This is a 10 3/4-inch knife and it weighs in only at 7 ounces. It's a little light for me, and I have to admit, when I first saw it, I thought the shape was a little silly. It reminds me kind of a letter opener. I was hesitant to buy this knife. I didn't think I would like it, but after throwing it, it quickly became my favorite Kizlyar throwing knife. Kizlyar calls this tip a clip point, but you don't really see the clip. I would call it more of a straight edge, but I'm not a blade expert. Let me know in the comments what you would call this type of tip. No matter what though, The tip is fantastic. It is sharp, it sticks really well, it's an easy knife to throw, and that's why this is my favorite. I can give this to people that haven't thrown knives before and they're able to get it to stick. Having a really pointy tip is important because it makes it so much more enjoyable to throw knives when they're actually sticking to the target. Unlike the Impulse, which is a very dull knife, this one, the tip sticks fantastically. Because of the longer blade on this knife, it makes a good half spin throwing knife. So if you like throwing from the blade, this is a good knife for you. Out of the Kizlyar knives, this is the one I'm the most accurate with. I can hit bullseyes over and over again with this knife, half spin. Now, just because it makes a good half spin knife doesn't mean it can't throw full spin. It has a handle that fits my hand perfectly for full spin. It has this little groove where my thumb goes, and it actually throws really well full spin. Again, that's why this is one of my favorite Kizlyar knives. I can throw it equally well, half spin or full spin. I can throw it no spin if I like. It has that little groove that my finger goes into very nicely for no spin. I wouldn't call this a specifically no spin knife. It works better for half spin and full spin, but I can throw it well no spin. So I think this is a good all around knife. That's why the leader is my favorite Kizlyar throwing knife. Next up, we have a classic and very popular style Russian throwing knife, the Vytish, and I'm sorry if I am butchering that pronunciation. This is a 9.5-inch knife at 7 ounces. It has a very similar blade and point to the leader. It weighs the same as the leader, but it is 1.25 inches shorter than that. It is a handle heavy knife. It has a point that sticks well and easily. This knife is so easy to throw half spin that this is the knife I chose to give to my 4-year-old daughter to learn knife throwing.
Nice.
As a pointy, handle-heavy knife, this makes a great half-spin knife. It makes a decent military half-spin knife, and it makes a fantastic no-spin knife. This knife is great at no-spin, and I think a lot of the classic Russian knife throwers use a Vytish for no-spin throwing. The only thing it's not great at is full spin, but you can still throw full spin on it. Because that handle is a little bit heavier, it rotates a little fast when you throw full spin. But other than that, it is great at all styles of knife throwing. This is the Kizlyar knife that I recommend the most. So if you're gonna pick one Kizlyar throwing knife, I would say get the Vytish. This will give you an insight into what professional throwing knives are like, and you can throw the most styles with it, and it sticks really well. Next up, we have the Oseter. The Oseter is a very famous Russian style throwing knife. This Oseter is 9.5 inches at 8.5 ounces. It is a very solid, well-balanced throwing knife. It is good for throwing all styles, but Oseters were originally designed by the Russians for no-spin throwing. But because of its weight and balance, it works well for full spin, it works well for half spin, and of course, no spin. I have a little trouble with it for military half spin, but you can throw all styles of throwing with an Oseter. Many American knife throwing companies copy the Oseter style, primarily because it's the one that resembles a regular traditional knife. I am a sucker for Oseter throwing knives. I always end up getting them because I really enjoy the style. I like throwing knives that have a traditional knife shape to them. They look like a real knife, and I enjoy that. But Oseters are hard to stick because of the drop point that they have. They bounce off the target quite often. Now, if you're a good knife thrower, you're gonna get it to stick. You can practice with an Oseter and you will get good at it. I just think the Vytish, the Leader, the Lepi Stock, those knives are much easier to stick and less annoying. I would hate for you to get a throwing knife and get frustrated because you're just not sticking the knife. The Oseter is that knife. This is the one that frustrates me the most because it bounces off the target quite often. I have the most luck throwing it no spin or full spin. Full spin because I'm putting a lot of force behind it. No spin because I'm really aiming that tip into the target. But half spin, the way it rotates, and because I'm usually closer for half spin, I hit that drop point and the knife bounces right off and I get frustrated. Lastly, we have the Strige. This is an 8.5-inch knife at 6.7 ounces. Now, I really did not want to buy this knife. It was the last Kizlyar knife I finally bought because I liked all the other ones. I thought I'd give it a try. But the reason I didn't want to buy it is because I don't like smaller knives. I have big hands, smaller knives are annoying to throw, and I thought, that knife just seems a little too small for me. It seemed a little too light for me. I also thought the shape was silly. I don't like fantasy knives that have weird shapes just for aesthetics or because they look cool. I like functional knives. And so I thought, it's got these weird cutouts for it, probably just for looks. But after throwing it, I realized there was a lot of thought put behind this knife. It has a spear point tip that stabs and digs into the target very well. This is the Kizlyar knife that I have the most fun throwing. Again, my favorite knives are the Leader, the Vytish, and then the Strige is the one I have the most fun throwing. As I said, these grooves are very strategically placed. When I throw this knife half spin, my thumb just goes perfectly into this groove. It gives me a great hold in order for me to throw this half spin. In order to throw full spin, it has this nice little shelf for my thumb where I can place this and I can hold it really well for a full spin. Because of the small spear point, it throws fantastically military half spin. The Strige throws well for all styles of knife throwing, and it is so fun to throw. The only disadvantage to it is its size. Because of its size, it's not good for throwing past 10 feet. This is a close distance knife. And so if you throw indoors, if you throw close distance, this knife is so fun. I recommend this knife a lot. I like it so much that I ended up buying 6 of these. Me and my kids love throwing these knives. I have so much fun throwing the Strige, but we always throw it close distance just because of its size. I throw it anywhere from 6 to maybe even 9 feet, and that seems to be the sweet spot for this knife. I have so much fun with the Strige. The grooves, the places for my fingers are so comfortable that I even had one sharpened just for fun. If you want to see how that knife turned out, check out my video on sharpening a Kizlyar Strige. I hope I answered all the questions you might have about the Kizlyar throwing knives. If you have any other questions, throw them in the comments. Well, thank you for visiting Halfspin. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and check out my other videos. I will see you next time.